As the last breath escapes the purple-haired man's lips, Jin-Woo stands in a cold silence, watching the life fade from his opponent's eyes. The blood pooling around him stains the ground, a stark reminder of the brutal battle that just transpired. But Jin-Woo's expression remains stoic, his gaze unwavering as the man's body begins to dissolve into nothingness, the traces of life and power vanishing along with him. The weight of what just happened settles over the battlefield, but Jin-Woo does not flinch. Instead, he stands still, reflecting on the conflict, his mind processing the strange, unsettling words of his fallen foe. As the man's final words echo in his mind, "Your shadow is connected to the darkness." Jin-Woo feels a deep, unsettling truth. The darkness, his power, is something that's both his strength and his curse. With every battle, with every victory, it becomes harder to ignore the growing emptiness that comes with it. Jin-Woo places a hand over his hood, pulling it down over his face, hiding his eyes from the world. The shadow of his former self seems to grow larger as his strength does, and yet with each step forward something precious seems to be slipping away. He can feel it, that sense of losing something vital with every victory, every new power he gains. He shakes his head slightly, not in defeat, but in quiet acknowledgement of the reality he faces. Each battle has a cost, and with the strength he's acquired, the weight of those costs is growing heavier. He reflects briefly on the urgency of the quest, realizing it's finally over, and yet it feels strangely hollow. The sense of accomplishment is there, but it's tinged with something darker, the realization that becoming stronger might not be the only thing he needs to focus on. Looking down at the body of the purple-haired man, Jin-Woo lets out a quiet breath, feeling the immense weight of his own power. The world around him seems to hum with potential, but it also carries a heavy silence. For all the power he's gained, for all the battles he's won, there is a quiet sadness in his heart. With a final glance at the remnants of his enemy, Jin-Woo turns and walks away, the shadow of his former self lingering behind him, ever growing, ever consuming. The path ahead is uncertain, but one thing is clear. The more powerful he becomes, the more he has to lose. As the boy stands, the weight of the battle lingering in the air, those around him begin to take in the aftermath. The girl, who has been a silent observer of Jin-Woo's strength, steps forward. Her voice is shaky, but filled with gratitude as she thanks him for saving them. Jin-Woo doesn't respond, his gaze fixed ahead, but the sincerity in her voice resonates in the quiet. Another man, his face etched with relief and appreciation, approaches from behind, stopping beside Jin-Woo. With a genuine smile, he thanks Jin-Woo once again, acknowledging that if it weren't for him, they would have met a far worse fate. Jin-Woo merely nods, not acknowledging the praise, but inside he can't help but feel the burden of the many lives he's touched, some saved, others lost. Meanwhile, the two other hunters who had entered the dungeon later begin to shift their attention to more pressing matters. Their minds are on the larger picture, on what needs to be done after the chaos has settled. They know they must inform the guild about the raid and the tragic losses that came with it, and their thoughts turn to the steps needed to ensure this doesn't happen again. Jin-Woo, ever focused, speaks up, suggesting that they start by closing the dungeon gate. The man standing next to him hesitates for a moment, his instinct telling him to challenge the idea. But after watching Jin-Woo's quiet display of skill and power, he realizes that he cannot contradict him. They must act quickly, and Jin-Woo is right. As the group stands there processing the grim reality of their situation, the man next to the girl looks at the fallen bodies of their comrades scattered across the cold ground. A heavy sigh escapes him as he contemplates what must be done for them. He'd like to give them a proper funeral, but the urgency of the situation weighs on his mind. There's no time for mourning just yet. In the distance, the two hunters who had initially been in the dungeon begin discussing their next steps. Their words are laced with the knowledge of the grim future that awaits them. They must regroup, inform the guild, and prepare for whatever comes next. The world of hunters is unforgiving, and this battle, while won, is but a small piece of the larger, unrelenting war. As Jin-Woo listens to their plans, he is reminded of his own path. One victory, one loss, but the road ahead remains unclear. The tension in the air is thick, and though the dungeon is closing, the fight is far from over. Jin-Woo, his eyes cold and focused, walks up to the man before him. In one swift motion, he draws his dagger, the sound of the blade slicing through the air sharp and clear. As soon as the weapon is firmly in his grip, a sudden shift occurs. The space around him seems to ripple, and a faint bluish light begins to shine, expanding outward in all directions, casting everything in a strange, almost blinding glow. In that moment, Jin-Woo stands still, holding the rune with magical power in his hands, contemplating the path ahead. The power contained within this rune pulses with energy, and he realizes something profound. If he can rid himself of his enemies, he may have the chance to harness their power to absorb their strength and become even more formidable. This new understanding sharpens his focus, but for now he doesn't act on it. He stands a quiet storm of thought as his mind processes the implications of what he can do next. His thoughts are abruptly interrupted as Mr. Sung, who had been lost in deep contemplation about their situation, is pulled back to the present. Two of the other hunters, already aware of the gravity of their circumstances, approach him. They inform him that they're going to notify the guild about what happened and advise him to hurry up. The urgency in their voices is palpable. There's no time to waste. Without hesitation, Jin-Woo responds with quiet confidence, his voice steady and firm. He tells them not to worry, reassuring them that it won't take as long as they might think. His tone, while calm, carries an unspoken assurance he's in control of the situation. His words, simple yet powerful, cut through the tension in the air, signaling that he's ready to move forward and handle whatever comes next. Jin-Woo, cloaked in shadow, steps forward with a quiet, ominous presence. His face is hidden beneath a deep hood, and his hands are tucked into his pockets, giving him an air of indifference. His footsteps are measured and deliberate as he approaches the lifeless body of the man lying in a pool of blood. The faint blue glow emanating from under his hood reveals the intensity in his gaze, the light in his eyes shimmering with quiet power. He speaks, his voice cold and cutting as he demands the man rise. There's no doubt in his words, no hesitation in his tone. Jin-Woo is certain the man is still alive. As his words echo through the quiet, the boy acknowledges almost disdainfully that the man's attempt to play dead is merely a desperate attempt to escape. His frustration grows as he realizes the man is unable to respond, and with a slight scoff, he remarks that Kang Tae-shik would have been far tougher, enduring far worse. The black-haired man trembles at Jin-Woo's words, feeling the weight of his situation. He can sense the grim inevitability of his fate, and for a brief moment a glimmer of hope stirs in him. Jin-Woo's voice, however, offers no comfort, only the cold reality that his survival might yet be possible, but only if he meets the boy's expectations. The boy grabs the man by the collar and drags him roughly across the floor, the motion as effortless as it is merciless. The man, weak and defeated, is pulled through what appears to be a passageway that leads to an ominous wooden gate. Torches flicker along the walls, casting long, eerie shadows that seem to stretch into the gloom. Each step he takes with Jin-Woo feels heavier, as if the weight of his past choices is catching up to him. The wooden gate looms ahead, beckoning them both into whatever lies beyond. The scene unfolds with terrifying clarity as the man, now trapped within the grim dungeon, is surrounded by a horde of monstrous creatures. His breath quickens as he realizes his fate. Dozens of red-eyed beasts, their gaping mouths dripping with hunger, begin to close in on him. The shadows grow darker as the boy Jin-Woo silently closes the door behind them, his cold gaze never leaving the man's trembling form. With a cruel indifference, Jin-Woo crosses his arms over his chest and delivers his verdict. He coldly asks if the man remembers all of his victims, his voice carrying the weight of someone who has seen countless atrocities unfold. The man's eyes widen in panic and his heart races as he stammers, unable to form a coherent reply. Jin-Woo's glowing blue eye pierces through the man's fear, and with a venomous tone he declares that someone like him will never be allowed to leave. He is far worse than Kang Tae-shik ever was, and he will never escape his punishment. The man, helpless, stumbles backward in desperation, his eyes darting around for any way out, but there is none. As if summoned by Jin-Woo's words, a massive wave of hungry, grotesque monsters appears behind the man. Their twisted forms, green snarling goblins, climb over each other, their mouths opening wide in anticipation of their meal. The man tries to scream, but his voice is lost amidst the deafening growls of the creatures. Their claws and teeth tear into him, climbing up his body, pulling him down. Desperation fills his every movement as he struggles to break free, but the goblins are relentless. One of the goblins, its teeth sharp as daggers, sinks its jaws into his fingers, ripping them off with terrifying speed. The man lets out a blood-curdling scream, his body writhing in agony, as the green hands of the creatures drag him further into the depths of his torment. His once defiant posture is now reduced to that of a helpless prey devoured alive by the very creatures he once disregarded. Jin-Woo watches the horrifying scene unfold before him. He doesn't flinch, doesn't bat an eye. The sounds of the man's pain, the gnashing of teeth, and the desperate struggle for life are all drowned out by the silence of Jin-Woo's contemplation. His thoughts drift back to when he overpowered the hobgoblin without so much as a second thought, realizing how far he has come since leaving that dungeon. The boy, now turned predator, turns away from the grotesque scene. His expression remains stoic, unaffected by the horror around him. He had done what was necessary, but he had no time to dwell on the fate of this man. He had already been judged, and his punishment was meted out by the very ones he had wronged. After exiting the dungeon, Mr. Song and Jui tell the agent what happened, and she hurried to call Jin-Chul. When he arrived, he asked her how long it been, and she said 40 minutes. Jin-Chu continues, there are just 20 minutes left, and it been too long. He demand her to find the victim body in 8 minutes. If not, then quit and come back. He continue asking if the other clear the dungeon, which she answer they did. Chul, in deep thought, thinking about Kang Tae-shik's situation, he have some secret. Then he noticed Jin-Woo and introduce himself to Jin-Woo Kantianu that one of his man have caused problem and he will deal with it. And he is sorry for the trouble. Jin-Woo in some thought and conclusion that Jin-Chul is on another level of strength, as Jin-Chul said he want to ask Jin-Woo a few questions. And Jin-Woo agreed to the investigation. Suddenly he asked who killed Tae-shik. Jin-Woo think that his awakening can't be keep a secret anymore, but then suddenly Mr. Song say that he killed Tae-shik and answer another question. Jin-Chul in disbelief and ask how can a C rank beat the higher rank, and hearing that Mr. Song point to Juhi say with her help, Jin-Chul is left in disbelief. Because even they can't control Tae-shik, how could the hunters kill him so easily? Then he asked Mr. Song to come with him to make some reports. Suddenly Jin-Woo call out to Mr. Song and ask him why he lied, which he answer that he want to help Jin-Woo hide his power and that the least thing he can do for Jin-Woo. Jin-Chul call out to Jin-Woo And he continued that he don't believe that Jin-Woo could kill Tae-shik, and that he need to be careful. Jin-Woo in confusion ask what Jin-Chul mean, which he answered that on the last raid with Dong-Suk team only Jin-Woo and Jin-Ho survive, and Dong-Suk brother Dong-Soo may find them to take revenge. Jin-Woo listens carefully to Jin-Chul's words, his eyes narrowing slightly as he processes the information. The weight of the conversation settles in and he senses the gravity of the situation. Jin-Chul, standing before him with a calm yet somewhat ominous demeanor, continues to explain the implications of surviving the raid and the danger it now places on Jin-Woo's head. You've become a living miracle, Jin-Chul says, his voice steady but carrying an edge of caution. But you've also become a disaster for those who once held power. Hwan Dong-Suk's group had influence and now you've toppled it. The law can't touch an S-rank, but they'll try in other ways. Jin-Woo, his expression unreadable, clenches his fists in silence, contemplating his next move. He knows well the strength that comes with being an S-rank, but he also understands the danger it brings. It's not just about power, it's about what others will do to control or eliminate threats like him. The conversation shifts as Jin-Chul continues urging Jin-Woo to be careful not just of the enemies he knows, but of those he may not even see coming. The S-rank holders are different, he adds. They don't follow the same rules, and they won't stop until they get what they want. The warning hangs heavy in the air, but Jin-Woo remains stoic, his gaze unwavering. He knows that the path ahead will be fraught with challenges, but he's already proven that he can handle the odds stacked against him. He just needs to keep moving forward no matter the cost. As the conversation winds down, Jin-Chul gives a final piece of advice, one that Jin-Woo takes to heart. Watch your back, Jin-Woo, because those who want you gone won't wait for the law to catch up with you. And when they come, it won't be for a fight, it'll be for your life. With that, Jin-Chul steps back, his eyes flicking briefly to the people around him before he turns to leave, leaving Jin-Woo to consider the weight of the warning. Jin-Woo watches him go, his thoughts racing. There's no denying that his life has changed irrevocably since the day he stepped into the dungeon. He's no longer just a low-ranking hunter. He's someone to be feared, someone who can topple entire organizations with his strength. But that same power comes at a cost. And now it seems the cost is his survival. With a deep breath, Jin-Woo straightens up, his resolve hardening. He knows that he can't let his guard down, not even for a moment. There are those out there who want him dead, and he has to be ready for whatever comes next. But for now, he pushes those thoughts aside. He'll handle one challenge at a time. And right now, the most important thing is taking care of what's in front of him. The rest will come later. As he watches Jin-Chul disappear into the distance, Jin-Woo turns and walks the other way, his mind already racing with plans for the future. The game has changed, and now he's in it for the long haul. The boy looks at the glowing petal with curiosity, his mind racing as he recalls the significance of such an object. It seems familiar to him, but he's unsure of its exact origin. The girl, noticing his hesitation, smirks slightly, sensing his confusion. She presses him gently, asking once more if he truly remembers. The boy tilts his head, the gears in his mind turning slowly as he shifts his gaze from the petal to the girl's expectant eyes. Slowly, his memories flood back. He recalls a time long ago when he had encountered something like this, a symbol of connection, something he thought lost in time. I do remember, he finally says, his voice steady but laced with uncertainty. But it's not what I thought it was. Where did you get this? The girl looks at him, her expression softening for a moment. It's a reminder of a promise, she replies. One that perhaps neither of us can break, or at least one that you'll remember in time. She holds the petal up, its glow illuminating the space between them, casting an ethereal light that seems to pulse with energy. The boy's eyes narrow and he steps closer, feeling a strange energy from the petal. A sense of urgency mixed with an unspoken understanding fills the air around them. He realizes that whatever path lies ahead this moment, and the petal in her hand will guide him toward it. As his thoughts continue to race, the world around him seems to fade, and all that matters is the quiet understanding between them. Tell me more, he says, the weight of the situation settling in. What do you know about this, really? The girl smiles slightly, a mixture of determination and hidden sorrow in her eyes. Everything and nothing, but you'll understand soon enough. In the night of the city, Jin-Woo with Juhee are going out for a walk. The girl's voice falters as she speaks, her eyes filled with an emotion that's hard for her to put into words. She looks down at her hands, gripping them tightly behind her back. I thought I could keep up, she continues, almost as if talking to herself, but it's like I'm stuck while you've changed so much, and me, I'm still the same, fighting to stay afloat in this endless storm. Jin-Woo, walking alongside her, remains quiet for a moment, sensing the weight of her words. He can see the internal struggle that she's carrying, even though she tries to hide it. He knows well the pressure that comes with being a hunter, the fear that gnaws at you as you rise in rank, knowing that one wrong move could cost you everything. He overcome more than anyone should ever have to. Jin-Woo says softly, his gaze steady and reassuring. Change is inevitable. We can't stay the same forever, not in this world. He pauses for a moment, turning to face her. You've made it this far, that alone shows how strong you are. The girl turns to look at him, her eyes sharp as she listens. Her lips tremble slightly, but she doesn't speak for a long time. She lets the silence settle between them, as if weighing his words before she finally responds. I'm scared, she admits, her voice barely above a whisper. Scared of becoming something. I don't want to be a hunter. It's like you start to lose yourself piece by piece. I never wanted this life. But somehow I'm still here. She glances up at him, her expression a mixture of resignation. She said that if Winwoo was a B-rank healer normally would go on a rank or B-rank dungeon, but even C-rank Jin-Woo can't handle it, but she still join E-rank raid and always meet Jin-Woo and keep healing all the injuries on him. The girl continues to care for him, her hands moving with practiced precision as she treats each of his wounds. Despite the occasional wince or grunt of discomfort from Jin-Woo, she doesn't let up her focus unwavering. As she works, her thoughts wander and she begins to reflect on everything they've been through together. He's always been this way, she thinks, her hands gently applying pressure to a particularly deep cut on his side. Naive yet incredibly strong in ways I can't even begin to understand. She's seen him face monsters' betrayal and overwhelming odds time and time again. Every time he's come out victorious. It's not because he's unbeatable, far from it, but because he never stops, never gives up. Even when the world seems to close in around him, Jin-Woo keeps moving forward, always searching for a way out, always striving to protect those he cares about. She pauses for a moment, looking at him as he lies there, the faintest hint of a smile tugging at his lips despite the pain. His eyes, even though tinged with exhaustion, are filled with life. There's a spark in them that refuses to be extinguished no matter how many battles he faces, no matter how much darkness surrounds him. No matter how scary he gets, no matter how strong he becomes, he'll always keep going, she thinks. And I'll keep following him no matter where he lives. The thought brings a strange sense of peace despite the chaos that's constantly at their heels. To see the next day, to face the next challenge, the words echo in her mind as she finishes treating the last of his wounds. She looks down at him, and for the first time in a long while, she's not afraid of what comes next. We'll survive together. Jin-Woo stirs, his eyes fluttering open, and he meets her gaze. There's no need for words. She knows that he understands. For the first time in a long time, the weight of their shared journey feels a little lighter. The path ahead is uncertain, filled with more dangers and challenges, but they'll face it together. And no matter how scary the world becomes, no matter how tough the road ahead, she knows that with him by her side, they can survive anything. They both share a quiet, unspoken promise. No matter what, they'll keep moving forward. Jin-Woo stands still, his gaze unwavering as the girl walks away, the distance between them growing with every step she takes. His fingers tighten around the item she gave back to him, a symbol of the connection they once had and the unspoken promise of a future he isn't yet ready to accept. She's leaving, he thinks, his heart heavy with the weight of the moment. Her words echo in his mind. If you want to see me, just give a sign. It's a simple enough request, but for some reason it feels like more than just an invitation. It feels like a challenge, a call for him to keep moving forward, to keep growing, to keep becoming stronger. He watches her figure disappear into the distance, the world around him feeling just a little bit emptier without her presence beside him. I'll get stronger, he vows, silently squeezing the object in his hand even tighter as though trying to draw strength from it. The pain in his chest, the uncertainty of the future. He pushes it all aside for now, focusing only on the path ahead. Jin-Woo's mind drifts, the memory of Hwan Dong-soo resurfacing. The S-rank hunter, the one who had become a symbol of power and fear. Jin-Woo in deep thought, thinking he will become stronger and fast so that he can survive in this world. Somewhere in the mountains, Jin-Woo, dressed in a red sweatshirt, stands there with a look of dissatisfaction as he surveys the group around him. His eyes narrow, clearly puzzled by the odd mixture of people before him. From the weakest to the most bizarre in appearance, they all seem to have gathered for the same purpose, yet there's an air of unease in the way he's studying them. Turning to Jin-Ho, Jin-Woo's expression remains unchanged, but his curiosity is evident. He asks, "Are these people really part of our team?" Jin-Ho, brimming with energy and optimism, responds with a bright smile, stating that yes, everyone here is part of the team. He begins to list the members. Those with hunters' licenses, but unable to participate in raids due to injuries, others struggling to make ends meet because of life's hardships, and even some who are simply looking for a quick buck. His gaze falls on a girl who stands apart from the rest, her presence seemingly disconnected from the others. Jin-Woo raises an eyebrow as he observes the group and then asks with a hint of confusion, "Are children even allowed to participate in raids?" Jin-Ho casually replies, "As long as an adult is awakened, it's fine." The girl, who appears to be much younger than the rest, steps forward and defends herself, saying, "I'm not a child. I'm a hunter who's completed all my training." Jin-Woo eyes her for a moment before questioning her about her experience in raids. She admits that she has none, prompting Jin-Woo to conclude that she's an E-rank hunter. Good enough, Jin-Woo mutters to himself, deciding that she'll stand guard outside the dungeon while he and Jin-Ho handle things inside. Jin-Ho, now taking on a more authoritative role, continues, saying they need 10 people with at least a C-rank or lower to accompany them. This catches the attention of the others, and some begin to murmur among themselves about how these two must be quite powerful if they can handle the dungeon alone. One person raises a question about the money, asking if they're really not going to get paid that much for the work. Another confirms the amount. Everyone will be paid 3 million even if they don't have to lift a finger. The man goes on to clarify that they'll have to repay the amount tenfold if they slip up during the mission. Jin-Woo, deep in thought, looks up from where he's been listening quietly, his eyes shifting from Jin-Ho to the others. He speaks up, his voice steady. I'm still curious about something. Before anyone can respond, Jin-Ho, now dressed in a full set of hardened armor made by the Italian Guild, interrupts the conversation. He looks at the group and states that they need to prepare. Just as the conversation begins to shift, a boy standing nearby reaches out and touches Jin-Ho's armor lightly. With a swift motion, the boy causes Jin-Ho to collapse to the ground with ease, the heavy armor crumpling around him, leaving behind a puff of smoke. The boy doesn't seem surprised by what just happened. In fact, he simply smirks and says, "Take off your armor, it's not useful here." Jin-Ho, struggling to get up, brushes himself off and with a serious look responds, "All right, time to go." He hesitates for a moment, though a little unsure of what lies ahead, but his resolve is clear as he stands up from the cold ground. The boy, unfazed, watches as Jin-Ho readies himself. Despite the chaotic nature of their surroundings, it's clear that this team is about to face a challenging raid. The atmosphere is thick with anticipation as they prepare to step into the unknown, each person knowing that they have a role to play in what could be their greatest test yet. The atmosphere grows tense as Jin-Woo stands next to Jin-Ho, feeling slightly uncomfortable with the appearance of the guy in front of him. He raises an eyebrow and asks, "What are you wearing on your head? Are you serious?" Jin-Ho, ever the optimist, responds, "Why don't you take off that helmet for safety?" Jin-Woo sighs and agrees, but as the conversation between the two teens continues behind them, there's a heated exchange of words. One of the men sips his cigarette, muttering aloud, "What's the point of going to such a low-ranking dungeon if they're so strong? What if they both die?" Another teen chimes in, saying he's heard of Sung Jin-Woo, E-rank with the alias Weakest Hunter. He's clearly a familiar name, and the others seem to recognize the weight of the words. One of the men, who's still smoking, exclaims in disbelief, "It's like they're just playing around, thinking these young guys will only get hurt." Meanwhile, Jin-Ho and Jin-Woo seem to be the subject of a heated discussion. As the chatter continues, Jin-Ho suddenly appears sprinting with his backpack, slightly out of breath. He stops to catch his breath, leaning forward, clearly exhausted from the run. The others, now starting to calm down, explain that they managed to escape the worst and survived. One of them decides to investigate where the two men had run from. He exclaims loudly, "Did they really take down the boss?" The people gathered around them react in disbelief, eyes wide with shock as the gate closes, and a bluish light accompanied by flashes of bright lightning marks the successful completion of the task. As the group continues to process this information, Jin-Woo looks at Jin-Ho and asks, "Where's our next target?" Jin-Ho, ever the determined leader, simply replies, "We've got about 3 more dungeons to mop up." His words are followed by a charge of energy, and he adds with a grin, "Let's give our best for the 3 million. The group stands around, stunned by the pace and intensity of the raid. Many of them are still processing the fact that these two young hunters, seemingly so fresh, have already accomplished so much. Who are they really? One person wonders aloud. Others too are pondering whether they're about to raid again right after this dungeon. The sense of mystery and power surrounding Jin-Woo and Jin-Ho continues to grow, and their fellow hunters are left in awe, questioning just how strong these two are and what their true potential might be. At the White Tiger Guild, the atmosphere is buzzing with activity as a voice calls out from within one of the buildings, a sense of urgency evident in their tone. A man deep in thought listens to the conversation around him. Did someone really spend that much money to secure the rights to sweep all the C-rank gates? One of the men asks, his voice tinged with disbelief. Another man chimes in, "When I was trying to get up to 100 million, someone influential bought the whole thing for 200 million. The intrigue grows as they try to uncover more about this mysterious individual who has taken such bold actions. The name Yu Jin-Ho surfaces in the conversation, and it's quickly revealed that he's been securing gates all thanks to his company's support. This information sparks curiosity, especially when the name Jin-Woo is mentioned. The man in question is recognized as the survivor of an incident that took place 2 months ago, and the mention of his name immediately shifts the mood in the room. The atmosphere grows tense as one of the men, seemingly reflecting on this revelation, glances sideways, his hand resting on his chin. He seems to be pondering the significance of this situation, as if he has caught a whiff of something potentially huge, a golden opportunity perhaps. Suddenly the mood shifts again, and a loud commotion breaks out in the office. One of the workers reports, urging those present to find as much information as possible about Jin-Ho and Jin-Woo, emphasizing the need for thorough investigation into these two figures. The stakes are high, and the people at the White Tiger Guild are keenly aware of the potential consequences tied to uncovering the truth behind them. The man stands at the working screen, deep in thought, scrolling through the information in front of him. He's replaying the last 3 incidents in his mind, wondering if Jin-Woo truly managed to escape unscathed. The first incident was the 2-level dungeon, a difficult and dangerous situation, and the second, the death of Hwan Dong-suk's group. The third involved the murder of a member of the surveillance department. As he reflects on these events, the pieces start to fit together in his mind. It was in the second incident that Jin-Woo and Jin-Ho crossed paths. But what catches his attention now is Jin-Ho's connection to his company, a relationship that might explain everything. There were rumors about recruiting experienced workers for Yu Myung-han perhaps to start a guild, and it all starts to make sense. This connection to the company could be the missing link that ties all the events together. The man continues mulling over the details, each thought adding another layer to the puzzle. Slowly, it all clicks into place. Jin-Woo may in fact be an awakened one. He stops for a moment, doubting his own conclusion, wondering if he's overlooked something. But every piece of information, every clue he's pieced together points to one undeniable truth. Jin-Woo is the awakened one. A voice from the other side confirms his suspicions. How else could he survive 3 major incidents? One person asks. The man reflects on the report with varying ranks and the impossibility of the events, concluding that only an awakened individual could have made it through. He can't help but feel that someone has been manipulating things behind the scenes, possibly even dealing with the department's hunter. As the conversation moves forward, the man lists all the people who survived the global incident, but there's only one person left who could truly be responsible for these strange occurrences. The listeners digest the information, each of them beginning to understand the weight of what's at stake. Chief On Sang-min adjusts his bag with one hand, his posture calm yet determined, as he explains that they are headed out on a reconnaissance mission. The man in the business suit, clearly taken aback, stiffens at the statement, his disbelief apparent. It is highly unusual for someone of Chief On's position to be personally involved in such a task, as reconnaissance missions are typically handled by subordinates. The tension in the room rises as the business suit man struggles to comprehend why the chief would take such a hands-on approach to the situation. His voice betrays his confusion as he presses, "But Chief, you're actually going on the mission yourself." Chief On's eyes narrow slightly, his demeanor unwavering. "This is too important to leave to anyone else," he responds, flatly signaling the gravity of the situation. His calm confidence seems to quiet the surrounding murmurs. The business suit man remains silent, no longer questioning, but still trying to process the implications of this unusual decision. In the dimly lit cave, 3 large wolf-like monsters form a loose circle, their sharp teeth clashing and their jaws snapping in the eerie silence. The air around them feels charged, heavy with anticipation. One of the huge werewolves shivers slightly, its primal instincts telling it that something is wrong. It senses the trap closing in, but there's no escape, only the overwhelming sense of danger closing in from all sides. Through the dust and shadows, Jin-Woo materializes, his presence sudden and overwhelming. The monsters freeze, their instincts screaming at them to flee, but there's nowhere to go. They are surrounded, trapped in this cave with a predator far beyond their capabilities. As the smoke thickens and swirls around the area, the tension mounts. In the blink of an eye, Jin-Woo moves. With the precision of a seasoned hunter, he strikes his speed and power too much for the monsters to even react. They barely have time to react before he decimates them in a flurry of motion. In an instant, their bodies fall and the cave falls silent once again. Jin-Woo stands over the fallen creatures, his expression cold and unbothered. His mastery of combat is undeniable, and the monsters never stood a chance. He surveys the battlefield with a quiet confidence, ready for whatever comes next. Jin-Ho watches in awe, his grip tight on the pickaxe as he takes in the scene before him. The powerful display of Jin-Woo's skills leaves him stunned, his admiration evident. He quietly wonders how long Jin-Woo has been hiding such strength and just how much more the man is capable of. It's clear to Jin-Ho that Jin-Woo has been holding back his true potential, only now beginning to surface. As the last of the monsters crumples to the ground, Jin-Woo exhales deeply, a slight relief washing over him. The battle is over, and the tension that had been building inside him starts to fade. His eyes scan the area, briefly ensuring that everything is secure before he allows himself a brief moment of rest and drink the potion to restore his mana. Suddenly, there are one more werewolf monster appear, charging to Jin-Woo to revenge it, kind striking Jin-Woo. But he dodges, now locking in on the monster. And with a flash, he punches 3 hole on the wolf body with his bare hand. Jin-Woo stands still in the center of the dungeon, his gaze fixed on the quest alerts that have just popped up in front of him. His recent battle has left him feeling oddly calm, even though he's just wiped out a horde of monsters without breaking a sweat. The werewolf's body, now lying in pieces, is a reminder of just how powerful he's become. But there's something else, something more intriguing than the monster corpses scattered around. The notification about his level increase comes first, a reward for his effort. Then the next alert catches his attention: job change quest available. It's a title he's seen before, but this time it feels different. His mind races, thinking about what kind of transformation might await him next. He had never expected such a shift in his power, and now here he was considering the possibility of even more changes. The thought of job changes had always seemed distant, more of an afterthought, but now it's tangible. With a deep breath, Jin-Woo's focus sharpens. He wonders what kind of job awaits him this time. Something even more potent, or perhaps a completely new path, as Chief On and the man arrived at the dungeon. They can't hide the confusion on their face, as in front of them are all kind of low R-rank hunter. But they're just eating and messing around with Who entering the dungeon gate as he asks his subordinate. The pink hoodie girl asked them for their identity. And this is not a public area for everyone. Chief On is confused. and think to himself, who is this child, and he tell the girl to get out, this is for grown-up. Hearing that the girl respond that she a hunter so don't treat her like a kid. The thought of her being a hunter surprises him. After all, her demeanor doesn't suggest it at first. She might be young, but there's a dangerous calm in her expression. Chief On in his thought think that if he is correct, then the one who recruit her would be Jin-Woo, and he is special. Suddenly one of the hunters shout out that the leader coming back, everyone need to get ready to go on. Meanwhile, Jin-Ho, ever the strategist, begins discussing their next steps. His voice holds a tone of urgency, but his words indicate that he's already prepared for the upcoming events. Even though Jin-Woo is preoccupied with his surroundings, he listens to Jin-Ho's update about the dungeon gates and the plans for tomorrow. Let them keep the gates reserved. Jin-Woo replies calmly, his tone unwavering. Suddenly, Jin-Woo hears someone calling to him. As Jin-Woo look in the direction of the call, it turn out to be Chief On, and he introduce himself, and then he hand out to Jin-Woo a card at the coffee shop. Chief On tell Jin-Woo that his guild is one of the best in Korea. As he continue to get to the main point, he look at Jin-Woo, said that he want to recruit him to the guild, and offer double what he get from Yujin. As Chief On think they're no wait for making the right decision, and continues that Jin-Woo done well, he can get a pay raise, as he think that is a pretty good offer for a rank hunter, who recently was E-rank hunter. Suddenly Jin-Woo ask him what the price for the guild building so Chief On can make this offer. After hearing that, Chief On can't hide his confusion, and ask what Jin-Woo mean. Then he answer that they are not using all the floor, but the building will be around 50 billion won. Jin-Woo continue his question. That Chief On want to give it to Jin-Woo, then Chief On confusion state that he don't understand Jin-Woo question. Just then the man shrieked about 30 billion. After a while he got up from his seat and placed his hands on either side of the table. Because of such a loud shriek, even the people sitting near their table looked around in surprise, not understanding what had caused the noise. The boy explained that Yujin's offer had been for a 3 billion won building, so he figured this guild was offering him a building twice as expensive. The man pondered how strong the boy truly was. Perhaps he was bluffing since no one could verify his power. The boy said that if they didn't believe him, he could prove it, but in the meantime he thought to himself that maybe the chief knew about their relationship with Jin-Ho but had misunderstood something. The man was already mentally panicking, realizing that Jin-Woo might not be bluffing after all, and admitted that such a large sum was beyond his current capabilities, but that he needed time to discuss. The boy didn't leave him waiting long, and standing up while pushing back his chair said the meeting was over. The man clenched his jaw, thinking that if he hadn't rushed in to learn the details of someone else's deal, none of this would have happened. But he was pulled out of those thoughts by the boy, who had turned his back to the chief and drawn attention by turning his head toward the man, bluntly asking where he had gotten information about him. The boy clearly wasn't shy about asking such things, directly questioning whether the chief had looked into his past, making the man, when suddenly a drop of blood appear on the man's cheek. The man didn't know how to respond and felt drops of cold sweat begin to run down his face. At one point the boy vanished, and the man fearfully wondered if he was using a disguise. He then heard words behind him telling him not to turn around, and suddenly realized why Yu Jin had made such a suggestion. The man began to confess that he hadn't intentionally conducted any investigation, and he continued to speak, citing 3 global incidents as proof of someone else's strength as a high-ranking hunter. He mentioned that perhaps Jin-Ho had witnessed Jin-Woo's abilities during the second raid. The boy bluntly asked how many people currently knew about him, and the man replied honestly that only he and one subordinate, who was now eating lunch and thinking about his boss. The boy assumed he had been exposed due to his high gate clear rate and said he didn't want many people knowing about him. He then asked if a rumor about him got out, could he consider the chief and his subordinate responsible. The chief, slightly nervous, covered his eyes and said he was obligated to report it to the guild master, but he didn't particularly want to die so soon. The man added that he would properly convey the message to his subordinate, only to be thanked in return. The boy went on explaining that due to his extensive dungeon clearing, they had inadvertently hindered the White Tiger Guild, though they wouldn't stop. The man looked at him with slight nervousness, adding that there were fewer dungeons now and that newcomers still needed training. The boy looked at the chief confidently and offered a deal that would apparently fix everything. The man didn't quite understand what the boy was proposing and wondered aloud what he was expected to say. The boy then offered to sell them 3 gates they had reserved, stating that this offer was for today only and that it would be difficult for others to find such gates. The man thought that this boy was quite cunning, and since it would be tough to train newcomers, he agreed and asked the price. Without hesitation, the boy stated that he wanted 300 million won for each gate, causing the man to panic at the number. He said the price was beyond their guild's capabilities and offered a maximum of 200 million. The boy didn't seem interested in arguing and settled for 200 million. The man nervously extended his hand for a handshake, asking if they had a deal, and Jin-Woo said he was expecting 600 million won in his account. The boy seemed to recall a gift, forcing the man to open his mouth and receive a red liquid. Shocked, the man watched as the wounds on his face instantly healed, leaving nothing behind. Amazed, the man asked if he showed his aiming skills, could Jin-Woo trust him, and then requested that his secret be kept. The boy left the building while the man remained seated at the desk until a stunned subordinate ran up and asked about the glow on his face and whether they had secured the deal. The man, still recovering from the encounter, said they had met someone far more terrifying than expected. Meanwhile, the boy raised a phone to his ear to confirm that 600 million won had arrived in his account. The caller on the other end asked who he had sold the cancelled gate to, and the man replied that it was a trade secret. There was some shouting in the background. Coming from the second manager's office. There was noise and commotion. Something had clearly gone wrong. The chief appeared visibly shocked upon hearing the news from a subordinate that a C-rank gate still remained within their territory. A subordinate nervously extended his phone to the chief, reporting that the price at the gate was no more than 10 million won. The chief couldn't believe what he was seeing. The subordinate, still uneasy, added that Yoo Jin-Ho's team hadn't booked any gates for the day. The chief began to tremble, stunned by the realization that they had been deceived, made to pay for something that didn't exist at all. And now he had just failed the recon. The man could only reflect bitterly on the fact that he had acted without any fear, not even considering the possibility that the chief might expose someone else's identity. Then someone called, and an unknown number sent a new message. It was from Jin-Woo, stating that it was compensation for them digging into his past. The man exhaled, realizing this was exactly what Jin-Woo had anticipated all along, and recognized just how skilled and formidable the hunter truly was. Surprisingly, he calmed down, remarking that even in this roundabout way, he had still managed to get Jin-Woo's number, so one had to be content with what one had. He added that the money spent wasn't a significant amount for the White Tiger Guild, though he might still face issues with his superiors. Jin-Woo, dressed in a sports uniform, stood with his hands clenched and announced aloud that he was about to start something. As he spoke, a purple glow appeared in front of him, dazzling everything around with its brightness and creating a powerful atmosphere. His hair was slightly tangled and lifted by the surge of energy. He mentioned changing jobs, saying it sounded pretty good. A large purple glow formed before his body, as if beckoning him to step inside. While he wondered what kind of monsters might be in there, the glow gradually shifted through various colors, becoming alternately brighter and darker, drawing in anyone's attention. In that moment, it felt as though the game had finally become real for him. Jin-Woo stepped inside the gate, and then both he and the glow vanished from sight, leaving behind only darkness. A monster clad in large heavy armor swung its sword, engaging Jin-Woo in combat as best it could. Instantly, Jin-Woo dodged the attack, and he was far stronger than the creature, and with incredible speed he closed the distance and eliminated his enemy. He used his critical strike, an ability that consumed his mana and was reserved solely for his dagger, to slay the monster as quickly as possible. The monster continued to attack him, making him use his sprint to dodge. To his surprise, Jin-Woo noticed that his attacks did no real damage, watching as the monster calmly withstood the magic. Reflecting on it, he realized the creature wasn't especially powerful. Its armor was simply durable enough to keep it alive. Jin-Woo analyzed the fight and noted the lack of unpredictability in the monster's movements, and that its attacks lacked the force needed to knock him down. When the monster aimed its sword again, it missed entirely. Meanwhile, Jin-Woo's shadow slipped behind it, scouting different angles for a counterattack. He recalled a past battle where his blade had been ineffective against similarly tough armor. Relying on his tremendous speed, he grabbed the monster's head and tore it apart before it had any chance to react. Jin-Woo identified it as a puppet-type monster, commenting that it was useless in prolonged battles, barely even worth classifying as a monster. Because Jin-Woo was using a torch for lighting instead of a fluorescent rock, the area remained quite dark. He realized he couldn't afford to spend too much mana here, as escaping required clearing the entire dungeon without leaving anything behind. It dawned on him that had he foreseen this situation, he would have allocated more stat points into intelligence to avoid such limitations in his magical capacity. This career change quest was proving to be dangerously demanding. He also acknowledged that he had no way to heal himself, and suspected that he might be stuck here for a long time. Trying to stay focused, Jin-Woo wondered whether he had completed his daily quest, which usually took over 12 hours and was extremely tedious. He knew he needed to finish everything in this dungeon quickly so he could start his daily quest on time, thinking to himself that the centipedes would probably be next. At first, as Jin-Woo looked ahead and saw the path blocked by bulky armored figures, he understood there was only one thing left to do. He said he needed to deal with these monsters and their formidable defenses before moving forward. Without wasting time on overthinking, he leaned in as if locking onto a target. After dropping the torch, his open palm clenched into a fist, gathering so much force that powerful air currents began swirling around it. Aiming precisely, Jin-Woo struck the armor of one of the monsters, hitting with such impact that it was lifted into the air. His speed was so overwhelming that even without regaining footing, he dragged another monster behind him. Out of the four enemies, two were launched a great distance, propelled by the sheer power of his punch and the gusting stream of air surrounding them. Wasting not even a second, Jin-Woo morphed into a shadow-like blur and launched himself high into the air. Calculating his jump trajectory perfectly, he drove his knee into the head of one of the airborne monsters, taking it down instantly. He then turned to the other, grabbed its head with a crushing grip, and summoned all his strength to end it. The pressure he exerted was so intense that the monster's head burst off in the space between Jin-Woo's shoulder and elbow. At that moment, he realized that if his dagger couldn't do the job, he simply had to strike where the bones were. Jin-Woo examined the armor lying scattered on the ground, noticing that some pieces had even fallen off completely, though overall they still seemed decent enough. Amused, he remarked to himself that it was a good thing no one could see this gear, because while it looked ridiculous on the outside, the real question was whether it could actually protect him. As he continued inspecting the area, he came across a bag of gold, and after a rough estimate calculated that it contained around 30,000 gold coins. At some point, Jin-Woo suddenly became aware that someone was right next to him, prompting him to react with instantaneous speed, just barely in time. His dagger struck precisely, landing a direct hit to the head of one of the monsters. In his thoughts, he questioned whether the creature had been hiding behind a disguise. The discovery didn't reassure him, instead it made him slightly tense. The task was already far from easy, and now there were monsters capable of disguising themselves. Jin-Woo spotted what appeared to be a mage standing before him, and quickly realized that this time the disguised monster specialized in firepower. He had no clear understanding of what was happening in this strange place, noting that the magician was using illusion magic, just like Cho Hwan once had. As he sifted through his thoughts, everything began to feel eerily familiar, as though he were reliving a past battle. The room was teeming with monsters, each wielding a wide variety of dangerous skills and abilities, many of which posed serious threats to him. Jin-Woo came to understand that this dungeon was far more complex than he had anticipated, filled with monsters of different types, each with unique traits. He realized that if he reduced his strength, he wouldn't be able to break the knight's armor, and if his instincts dropped, he'd struggle against assassins. He needed to conserve as much mana as possible and stop chasing fleeting opportunities as his fatigue was mounting. Turning his back to the chaos, he felt as though everything was working against him, leaving him no room to recover his energy. Sweat began to bead on his skin, and his breathing grew uneven. The longer he stayed here, the worse his condition became. Eventually, he sat down on the cold floor, body slightly hunched, thinking he needed to close his eyes for a moment to ease the exhaustion. But just as he was about to relax, his hand instinctively reached for a sharpened arrow. That's when he realized rest was no longer an option. A large group of armored archers had gathered before him, their intent to slaughter him unmistakable. Gripping the arrow in frustration, Jin-Woo snapped it in half, deeply annoyed that even a moment of rest had been denied to him. Wasting no time, Jin-Woo opened the leather pouch and pulled out a flask of fresh water along with 20,000 gold coins, resources that might prove useful. He assessed his condition and noted that he had somewhat recovered from his fatigue and had gathered a variety of items that could aid him in the upcoming battle. Standing alone in an empty room, Jin-Woo remarked that even with his adrenaline still surging, there was one thing he couldn't grasp. He had no way of understanding the level of whatever awaited him behind the towering golden door. That door concealed something powerful, something intriguing, and he knew it wouldn't be easy. Wasting no time, Jin-Woo pressed his hand against the door, which slowly began to open. He quickly realized it was the boss room. Inside, a powerful gust of wind stirred the air, ruffling his hair and tugging lightly at his clothes. The chill was so intense it sent a tremor through his spirit. Jin-Woo scanned the room, carefully analyzing his surroundings and noting that it resembled a throne room, although no one was present yet. As he stepped farther inside, he was struck by the overwhelming and terrifying aura that filled the space, a sensation that could only spell danger. He tried to understand what his body was telling him. His ears, eyes, and fingertips all responded sharply to the oppressive atmosphere. Staring ahead with focused intensity, Jin-Woo had the distinct sense that he had felt something like this before. The feeling reminded him of a place he hadn't forgotten, the second-level dungeon that had haunted his memory. His eyes locked onto a powerful figure ahead of him, dressed in a red uniform and radiating a chilling, terrifying presence. That same bone-deep fear began to rise again, and as Jin-Woo studied the figure, he understood. It was from this one man that the crushing energy was emanating. The figure before Jin-Woo was the blood warlord of Igris. His eyes glowed with a white light, and his face was concealed, impossible to see with ordinary vision. Everything about him was carefully hidden. Jin-Woo clenched his jaw, fully aware that this dark red title was unlike any he had encountered before. He realized that the knight standing before him was no ordinary foe, but the one tasked with guarding the empty throne, eliminating all intruders with unmatched might. He couldn't ignore the fact that the knight was walking directly toward him with clear intent, causing his muscles to tense. Without hesitation, the Blood Knight swung his massive weapon, clearly aiming to end the fight quickly. Jin-Woo reacted, instantly dropping low to the floor to avoid being cut to pieces. The sheer impact of the swing sent chunks of rock flying from the dungeon walls, shaking the ground with terrifying force. Jin-Woo likened the destroyed pillars to tofu, so effortlessly had the knight cleaved through them. Realizing this opponent was not just powerful, he was something else entirely. Without wasting a moment, Jin-Woo attempted to damage the knight's armor, but his blade failed to make even the slightest cut, leaving behind only a faint gilded mark. As he reeled from that failure, he noticed the knight's speed and cunning. Before he could react, the knight's weapon was already slicing toward him again. Jin-Woo barely dodged the blow, leaping away with such force that the ground cracked beneath his landing. In the darkness ahead, a yellowish glow shimmered, catching his eye. He realized this battle was going to be long and grueling. Clenching his jaw, Jin-Woo forced himself to stay focused, dodging the knight's massive swings with every skill he had at his disposal. He used the sweeping wind pressure to settle briefly on the ground, keeping his movements calculated. Meanwhile, the Blood Knight turned his back momentarily, as if searching for him, giving Jin-Woo a brief window to think. He recognized that armor limited movement for anyone with less than 80 points in strength, and this opponent was clearly far beyond that. His strength and agility both surpassed Jin-Woo's by a wide margin. Jin-Woo hadn't anticipated such an overwhelming difference in power. He doubted he could defeat this knight with a weapon alone, but he had another option. He began clenching his hands, mentally preparing for a different approach. The Blood Knight observed from the side, almost amused, as if watching a child try to challenge him. Yet despite this, the knight acknowledged Jin-Woo as a worthy opponent. In a surprising gesture, he set his weapon aside and began removing his red robe. He anchored its sharp ends into the rocky ground, seemingly to reduce the burden on himself during the fight. Now facing Jin-Woo in full red armor, the Blood Knight stared intently, signaling that he was ready for a true battle. But to Jin-Woo, that only made things worse. He took the gesture as an insult, as if the knight didn't consider him a serious threat. At that moment, the Blood Knight, without wasting even a second, accelerated toward Jin-Woo at incredible speed. The charge came so suddenly and unexpectedly that before Jin-Woo could react, the knight had already surged forward with overwhelming force. He had no time to move. It was as if he had become a puppet, frozen, watching as the knight grabbed him by the collar of his jacket. With brutal momentum, the Blood Knight hurled him straight into the wall behind. Jin-Woo's limbs felt sluggish, barely responsive, as he tried to make sense of what had just happened. Dazed, he managed to cross his arms over his chest just in time to brace for the knight's next devastating strike. But before the Blood Knight could continue the assault, Jin-Woo suddenly vanished from his sight. The knight's punch landed directly into the wall, and the impact was so violent that the stone collapsed entirely, sending chunks of debris flying across the throne room. Gritting his teeth, Jin-Woo felt a surge of unbearable pain. Even though he had managed to survive the blow, he realized with a grimace that he had just lost around 500 HP, despite wearing body armor. Jin-Woo realized that if he kept taking hits like the last one, he could easily lose. The Blood Knight's strength was overwhelming. As he observed the crimson-armored opponent, he struggled to figure out how he was even supposed to fight such a monster. Yet despite everything, the fire in his body hadn't faded. Determined, he broke into a sprint, relying on his speed to give him an edge. He activated his sprint skill, increasing his speed by 30%. Moving swiftly, Jin-Woo tried to disorient the Blood Knight with erratic movements, then suddenly appeared in front of him and drove his fist into the knight's armor. The Blood Knight reacted immediately, aiming his elbow at Jin-Woo's head with brutal intent. Jin-Woo barely had time to respond. He covered his head with his free hand, clenched his jaw, and resisted with all his strength. With considerable effort, he managed to push the knight's arm away from his skull. At the same moment, he launched a rapid series of attacks, his hands striking over and over again with increasing force, hoping to make the Blood Knight stagger. But in the middle of this onslaught, Jin-Woo lost track of his surroundings. That split second cost him. The Blood Knight swung his weapon and struck him directly in the head with tremendous power. Jin-Woo's head jerked sideways from the blow and his health dropped sharply. His passive resilience skill activated just in time. He noted with a flash of optimism that the skill had increased his defense, giving him a sliver of hope. But the Blood Knight wasn't finished. In a calculated move, he grabbed Jin-Woo's leg with his iron grip and without wasting a moment hurled him with full force. A deafening explosion followed. A blast of air rocked the battlefield, crumbling the ground beneath them. Smoke began to rise from Jin-Woo's body and blood trickled from the corner of his mouth. His strength began to fade. Flung across the room, Jin-Woo landed hard, right onto the throne of the Blood Knight. Barely able to move, he realized just how devastating the last strike had been. Jin-Woo bent down, unable to move in any other direction as the Blood Knight approached him, closing the distance with terrifying speed. It didn't take long for the knight to make his next move. Extending his arm to one side, the Blood Knight summoned his sword, which came flying toward him in a golden stream. The massive weapon landed firmly in his grasp, ready to carry out what he had intended from the start. This was the moment he had been waiting for. With deadly speed, the Blood Knight swung to finish Jin-Woo off. The atmosphere inside the dungeon grew thick with tension. The air was stirred by flying dust and debris. But Jin-Woo had no intention of dying here. He gripped the blade with his fingers, defiant and filled with fury, though the blow from the Blood Knight was immense, so strong that air pressure and smoke burst outward around them. Jin-Woo stood his ground. With his free hand, he began to gather what magic power he could, though his strength was quickly fading. He clenched his jaw, forcing himself to endure, and began to utter a single word at a time, painfully and deliberately, knowing full well that doing everything at once was nearly impossible in his condition. A dagger appeared in Jin-Woo's hand, the one he had summoned to himself, and in a sudden decisive motion it shot straight into one of the Blood Knight's eyes. The knight reacted instantly, his head jerking upward, the dagger still embedded deep within him. But Jin-Woo didn't stop there. Refusing to give his opponent even a second to recover or retaliate, he lunged forward and grabbed the knight's body with all his might. With raw strength, he slammed the Blood Knight against the opposite stone wall, pressing into him with crushing force. At the last second, Jin-Woo stumbled back, grabbing his dagger to ensure such a precious weapon wouldn't be left behind for anyone else. His gaze was cold-blooded and resolute. He had no intention of surrendering his weapon. As he observed others attempting to summon their own armaments, Jin-Woo extended his arm again, focusing on retrieving his dagger, determined to act quickly. In the same moment, he swung with immense power, aiming directly at the Blood Knight's throat. Confidence lit his expression as he waited for the moment to strike with absolute clarity. Then he activated Critical Strike, landing a devastating blow that left the Blood Knight hanging helplessly, his body unable to withstand such brutality. Jin-Woo didn't hold back his emotions. He screamed with the release of all his strength, pouring everything into a single final result. He looked directly into the Blood Knight's eyes, from which smoke had begun to curl out, and drove his dagger deep, finishing the fight. The Blood Knight collapsed to the floor, unable to counter the assault. Jin-Woo stood over him, breathing heavily, completely drained from the prolonged battle. The toll of the fight was evident in every part of him. After a moment, a strange white liquid began to seep from the Blood Knight's mouth, trailing down his chin and pooling into a small white puddle on the ground, surrounded by a faint stream of wind that lingered around the fallen foe. Jin-Woo couldn't catch his breath. Gasping for air, he asked himself in disbelief whether he had truly won. He clutched his hands tightly in his lap, the weight of what had just happened sinking in. He realized just how close he had come to death, because in truth he had been no better than the Blood Knight in raw strength or skill. The more he reflected on it, the more he understood that this victory had been sheer luck. Had he made even a single mistake, he would be the one lying lifeless on the cold dungeon floor. After spending some time in thought, Jin-Woo suddenly exclaimed in surprise. Interesting items had begun to emerge from the fallen Blood Knight. He even started to hum cheerfully as he held 4 different items in his hands, realizing that the reward he had just received was truly incredible. In that moment, Jin-Woo took out his leather sack and collected a total of 1,500,000 gold coins. His gold reserves had doubled compared to what he had before. But what shocked him even more was the S-rank item now in his possession, the Red Knight helmet, a powerful and valuable piece of battle gear. The helmet's stats were astonishing, granting several useful abilities that Jin-Woo desperately needed. In one hand he held an orange runestone infused with a trace of the ruler's power. In the other he gripped a mysterious green runestone which offered some sort of return effect, though its purpose was not yet entirely clear. As Jin-Woo carefully reviewed all the rewards he had gained from defeating the throne room boss, he couldn't help but feel there was still something more waiting to be uncovered. Jin-Woo's attention was suddenly drawn to a magical portal that had appeared from out of nowhere, a clear sign that things were not as simple in this place as they seemed. The atmosphere shifted, instantly becoming heavy and somber. Jin-Woo tensed his body on high alert as he stood still and waited, uncertain of what would emerge from within the portal. Jin-Woo's expression shifted to one of strain as he muttered that he knew things couldn't possibly be this easy, not in a dungeon like this. His instincts warned him that something dangerous and frightening was on its way. Whatever it was, it seemed to be monsters, though thankfully not as overwhelming as the boss he had just defeated. Lifting his head, Jin-Woo noticed a strange set of floating indicators above, some kind of display that hinted the longer he stayed here, the more complicated things would become. As he looked around, he saw someone, or something, emerge from the portal, stepping onto the cold stone floor. Another massive creature appeared before him, but it wasn't alone. Several monsters followed. Still, Jin-Woo remained confident in himself, believing he could take on these foes even in his current exhausted state, and that thought alone gave him strength. He considered that if these monsters were anywhere near the level of Igris, he'd stand no chance, but fortunately they didn't seem to be. Glancing at the floating timer again, he acknowledged that this pressure fit the nature of the career change quest. Jin-Woo realized he didn't have much mana left, but he was still doing well enough overall, even if he used his stealth ability. He reminded himself that each second of cloaking consumed exactly 1 point of mana, giving him a window of just 3 minutes. Still, with plenty of health and a reasonable amount of mana remaining, he resolved to hold out as long as he could. Just then, a wizard appeared from the shadows, activating a skill sharp enough to detect Jin-Woo's presence, forcing him once again into battle readiness. The mage activated a powerful skill that kept him alert and protected from surprise attacks, using it to track Jin-Woo's location. Floating in the air was an orb with a glaring eye, an artifact capable of detecting Jin-Woo's presence even when he used his disguise ability. Jin-Woo tensed, frustration rising within him as he realized he'd been discovered despite cloaking himself, something he hadn't expected. At that very moment, the knights in the room shifted their focus, locking onto his position in the air. The instant they had a chance to detect him in the open space, they prepared to strike. But before they could react, Jin-Woo suddenly appeared, and even with his back turned to the monsters, massacred them with extraordinary skill. His power surged with each move, and by unleashing his abilities he sent two of the monsters flying across the room. Turning toward where the two had been launched, Jin-Woo's gaze sharpened as he activated his bloodlust skill. The powerful aura immediately caused the surrounding monsters to lose 50% of their attributes, an effect that took hold instantly. Jin-Woo was well aware that bloodlust consumed 100 mana, meaning he only had one chance to use it. Shouting with determination, he declared that he had to eliminate as many enemies as possible within 1 minute. Surrounded by a swarm of monsters, he did everything in his power to drive back the majority of them, much to their surprise. Realizing they couldn't handle such a fearsome opponent, many of the monsters turned and fled en masse toward the open gate. But Jin-Woo was reaching his limit. His health had dropped dangerously to around 1,000. With a low growl, he admitted to himself that this situation was far more difficult than expected. 1 minute wasn't enough for a battle of this scale. Worse still, monsters continued pouring out from the portal at a rate faster than he could eliminate them. They weren't as mindless as they had seemed. A sudden notification alerted him that his passive skill Fortitude had been activated. He would have to rely on it now. Frustration crept in as he reflected on his earlier decision to use too much mana on disguises, which now left him unable to activate other critical skills. Facing the horde was becoming increasingly difficult. He briefly considered using the return stone but hesitated. Would fleeing now mean he had failed the quest? The thought weighed heavily on him. Jin-Woo's gaze drifted upward toward the clock hovering above the battlefield, and what he saw shocked him. It had only been 5 minutes since the onslaught began. The sheer number of enemies pressing in made it feel like an eternity, and he was struggling to keep up. Jin-Woo pulled out the green stone of return, realizing with a heavy heart that he had no other choice if he wanted to survive. It had come to this, he would have to use it. But as he stood there, his focus narrowed on the stone. He seemed unaware of the danger around him. A weapon hurled by one of the monsters that had seized the perfect opportunity was already flying toward him. In the next instant, it struck him with tremendous force, landing squarely on his forearm. The impact was so powerful that streams of wind whipped violently around his body. Jin-Woo couldn't maintain his footing, his strength gave out beneath him, and he collapsed, clutching the place where the blow had landed hardest. Suddenly, all the surrounding monsters fell into eerie silence, frozen in place, as if waiting to see what would happen next, watching Jin-Woo, who lay still on the ground. Then, without warning, a great surge of wind erupted from where he lay as if a titan were rising. But it was just Jin-Woo forcing himself back up, gathering every ounce of strength he had left. He bent slightly at the waist, his clothes torn and ragged, but none of that stopped him. Though the stone of return was still within reach, Jin-Woo's gaze had changed, now filled with fury, a defiant look that could not accept defeat. He made it clear to himself he would finish this quest, and he would do so without retreat. Seizing the moment, he curled his hand into a fist, summoning his remaining strength. With determination burning in his eyes, he whispered to himself what a great opportunity this was for one final stand. Jin-Woo recalled that because he had once been at rock bottom, he had always longed to rise to the very top, jumping as high as he could, driven by desperation and hope. He knew all too well the pain of being the weakest. The memories came flooding back, people questioning his worth, mocking his rank, doubting whether he could contribute anything at all. He remembered the scornful voices asking if he was the type to hide behind his comrades, the one who couldn't even kill a single monster. The sting of those words only fueled his resolve. Moments later, after leaping high into the air, Jin-Woo landed hard, slamming directly into one of the monsters below. But even then, the words followed him. He could still hear people calling him the weakest hunter, the infamous E-rank. He remembered how one man had listened to another speak about him with disbelief, unable to accept how someone so feeble could still be alive. What is it about him that makes him so weak, one had asked. Another scoffed that if Jin-Woo joined their raid, the dungeon would practically complete itself, an insult wrapped in mockery. Despite the bitterness in their words, he also remembered the kindness. There had been voices urging him to rest, encouraging him to sit down and take a break. And then came a booming voice cutting through the noise, challenging him, asking if it wasn't his own fault for tempting death every time. Jin-Woo turned toward that voice, uncertain whether he was hearing a miracle or a challenge. Could it truly be possible that an E-rank hunter could rise to such a level? His eyes locked onto the figure in front of him. To his shock, it was a younger version of himself, a mirror of his past speaking to the man he had become. Jin-Woo stood visibly shocked, a light sheen of sweat forming on his skin from the overwhelming nerves. He stammered, interjecting that he wasn't sure this version of himself was even real. The younger Jin-Woo, his child self, looked up at him with disbelief, saying he couldn't believe that this was who he would grow into. Someone so mature, muscular, and strong-looking. Yet despite listing all of the boy's impressive traits, little Jin-Woo continued declaring it was all just a facade. "You're just a coward," he said bluntly. Then with piercing honesty he asked what truly made them different, insisting that he too was standing once again on the edge of life and death, just as the older Jin-Woo was now. The older Jin-Woo remained silent, listening intently to the voice of his younger self resonating deep within him. Just then the younger Jin-Woo suddenly lunged forward and shoved a monster that had been swooping down toward the older, momentarily relaxed Jin-Woo, causing him to recoil in shock. Little Jin-Woo warned that if the older version of himself didn't learn to control his emotions, his own attitude would ultimately be his downfall. The older Jin-Woo, finding no words in response to the younger one's harsh but truthful advice, simply narrowed his eyes in frustration. His gaze shifted to one of irritation as he glared and snapped at little Jin-Woo, telling him to shut up. In an unexpected moment, a massive hand clad in heavy armor appeared from behind, catching Jin-Woo off guard and forcing him to stagger backward. His expression shifted to one of pure surprise. He hadn't anticipated that he could be vulnerable, not even for a second, especially while distracted by his younger self. But before he could recover, a towering monster in full armor loomed before him, its sheer presence radiating raw power. Only a few seconds passed before the monster launched its first strike, a direct hit that landed squarely against Jin-Woo's body and sent him flying in the opposite direction. The speed and force of the blow stunned him. He had no time to react. As he tried to dodge, the armored beast grabbed him, offering no chance of escape. A moment later, the monster's massive fist drove into Jin-Woo's back, knocking him off balance and slamming him face first into the stone floor. His expression twisted into one of disbelief. He never expected such ferocity from a knight. Up until now, none of the enemies had shown this level of aggression. The heavily armored knight continued to press Jin-Woo's body deeper into the already shattered floor as a crowd of other knights watched in eerie silence, surrounding the scene like an audience to a brutal execution. The smaller version of Jin-Woo stood firm, his voice calm yet piercing, as he told the older Jin-Woo that there was still much he would have to endure if he truly had no intention of giving up. He continued, saying that in order to move forward, he would have to make harder choices, straighten out even more people, and possibly leave some behind in moments of desperation, or worse, sacrifice them. That could include friends, family, people he cared about. His words struck deep, hitting Jin-Woo with the weight of a grim reality. Little Jin-Woo didn't hesitate, warning that by continuing to take everything on alone, the older Jin-Woo was digging his own grave while still alive. At that very moment, one of the towering armored knights raised its weapon, ready to end Jin-Woo. A strange sensation washed over him, one he had felt before but could no longer clearly remember. Just then, little Jin-Woo spoke again, his tone final. He said that luck too was a skill, and it seemed that letting Jin-Woo die here would be too great a loss even for luck itself. With those last words, the younger version of Jin-Woo finished his speech, and with a final glance he disappeared, leaving the older Jin-Woo standing alone amid the gathering storm of furious knights. Jin-Woo could no longer move. His body refused to respond, and there was nothing left within him to resist the fate closing in. With brutal force, the knight drove his weapon straight into the ground, aiming to end Jin-Woo once and for all. But in that instant, something changed. Jin-Woo's body vanished, transported into the penalty zone. The knight stood frozen, confused. Just a moment ago, the boy had been weak, barely alive, defenseless, and ready to fall. Now something had broken loose, spiraled out of control. The colossal knight looked down, realizing that instead of striking down his target, his weapon had only torn into the stone floor, shattering it with sheer power. While Jin-Woo was no longer there, Jin-Woo opened his eyes in fear, as if waking from a nightmare that had nearly ended in catastrophe. His breath came quickly, and for a moment he remained still, uncertain whether what he was experiencing was real. Slowly, he pushed himself up, glancing around at his surroundings. It looked like some kind of desert. He let out a long breath, relieved that he could finally take a moment to rest. Still catching his breath, he questioned aloud whether this truly was the penalty area. His mind flashed back to the final moments in the dungeon, the scene of his near-death. Reflecting on it, he realized he had completely forgotten to complete his daily quest. Time must have run out, activating the penalty zone and ironically saving his life. It was such a ridiculous, miraculous coincidence that he couldn't help but marvel at it. Somehow this technicality had pulled him out of the most dangerous situation he'd ever faced. He remembered the intense tension in the throne room, where a timer counted his every second, awarding points the longer he endured. That quest had been so difficult that only pure luck, or perhaps unrelenting determination, had carried him through. He pondered whether it was truly luck or just an absurd coincidence dressed in fate's clothes. Either way, he accepted it for what it was. Now he headed toward the in-game store, thinking back to the notification that his fatigue had surpassed 90 for the first time. He hoped to buy something practical, maybe even some kind of earth-related item to aid his recovery. When he used a potion, however, he was disappointed to find that it didn't restore his health. He would have to wait it out. Even as his thoughts wandered back to the profession change quest, Jin-Woo considered the possibility that training in the penalty area might help him gain experience. He stood up, rubbed the soreness from his neck, and smiled with confidence. He had never felt so strong, so alive. Now he only wondered if the monsters in this place could actually help him level up. Suddenly, Jin-Woo muttered to himself that he didn't need to worry, his voice calm, almost amused, as he noticed a few monsters looming ahead, already eager for battle. Without hesitation, he leapt from where he stood, landing squarely atop the head of one of the massive creatures. In a fluid motion, he drove his dagger down, finishing it off with precision. He kept moving, staying active and sharpening his edge, mentally affirming that if he could survive in this strange and punishing place, he would come out stronger. A notification appeared before him, informing him that in order to return, he would need to endure in the penalty zone for 4 full hours. Jin-Woo lifted his gaze to the side as if something beyond the monsters had briefly caught his attention, even in the midst of combat. Still focused, he pressed forward with a thought burning in his mind. Anything that doesn't kill them only makes them stronger. The girl woke up and sat up in bed, murmuring to herself about the strange dream she had just experienced. Still trying to shake off the lingering fog of sleep, she glanced toward the wall clock and realized it was quite late and the boy still hadn't returned. She wondered aloud if he was really working late again. With a sigh, she lay back down and pulled the blanket over herself, staring at the ceiling. A small thought crossed her mind: maybe he had gotten himself a girlfriend. But then she frowned, doubting that he would even be capable of that. She reminded herself firmly that she had definitely told him about the PTA meeting. He should be coming today, she had made that clear. Her gaze returned to the ticking wall clock as if seeking reassurance in its steady rhythm, quietly reevaluating whether he would in fact show up. A notification appeared informing Jin-Woo that the penalty quest was nearing its end. Only 15 minutes remained in this place. Without slowing down, he continued to tear through the surrounding monsters with impressive speed and precision, landing critical hits with practiced ease. Another notification arrived, letting him know that he had leveled up, news that brought a rare flicker of satisfaction to his face as he stood surrounded by fallen foes. He quickly realized that leveling up in the penalty zone came with more benefits than expected. Not only did his health replenish upon leveling, but he could also use the store to restore other abilities. That changed everything. Soon after, another alert appeared. Only 3 minutes remained before he would be returned to the profession change quest. Jin-Woo nodded to himself, muttering that there was still enough time to get ready. He would have to do whatever he could to prepare, because the dagger alone wouldn't always be enough. Jin-Woo reflected on the fact that he would soon need a stronger weapon, something far more powerful than the one he currently wielded. With that in mind, he opened the pop-up store and began searching through the available options. Scanning the listings, he came across a dagger that caught his attention, a weapon capable of piercing even armored targets. That alone was enough to make it stand out. However, the price was steep: 2,800,000 gold coins. Jin-Woo hesitated for only a moment, then thought, why not? He realized that with a weapon like this, the battlefield would look completely different. The dagger possessed a unique effect, Night Killer, which would make facing heavily armored enemies significantly easier. He could already feel the advantage it would bring. Jin-Woo carefully wrapped a bandage around his arm, securing the dagger in place along with it. He thought that by doing so he wouldn't risk losing his weapon the way he had lost the return stone. Once the bandaging was done, he looked up with a steady, confident gaze. He was ready for whatever fight or outcome awaited him. He knew he had to try no matter what. In his other hand, he held an orange rune stone, the ruler's touch. It might just give him another chance in a critical moment. He remembered how the last rune stone he had obtained, the one from Kang Tae-shik, had helped him learn the disguise skill. But this time something felt different. He activated the ruler's touch, and instantly a stream of golden energy swirled around him. A strange new power awakened within. He could now move objects without physically touching them. Even better, the skill didn't consume mana, which made it incredibly useful. Jin-Woo recalled how the Blood Knight had once used a similar ability. Perhaps in some indirect way it was thanks to that experience that he now wielded this power too. He tested it on a nearby rock, but it didn't budge. Skill wasn't strong enough yet to move anything too large. Still, this was the final stretch, his last chance to prepare. He had done everything he could in those last couple of minutes, and now the rest would depend on his own luck. As the time ran out, Jin-Woo realized with clarity the penalty quest had been successfully completed. Jin-Woo returned to the very place where he had nearly died not long ago at the hands of a horde of armored knights. It was as if they had been waiting for his return all along. He found himself surprised to be back here, especially after enduring 4 brutal hours in the penalty quest. And yet this battlefield was even worse now. There were far more knights than before. Without warning, a swarm of monsters descended upon him, determined to overwhelm and kill their target quickly. But what they didn't realize was that Jin-Woo had changed. He had grown stronger. With his dagger in hand, he tore through the first wave of knights like they were nothing more than meat sliced cleanly by the edge of his blade. His eyes flashed with a cold blue light, his presence now far more formidable. He moved with confidence, wielding his new weapon with expert precision, cutting through the enemies that once terrified him. It was almost surreal handling these knights with such ease, as if he had never even dreamed of struggling. Jin-Woo could already tell the Night Killer effect on his new dagger was incredibly effective. Compared to the days when he fought barehanded, this weapon changed everything. For what felt like an extended time, he continued slaughtering the waves of knights coming at him, yet something felt off. He began to sense a strange stillness beneath his feet, something about the floor itself. Even after defeating countless knights, his level hadn't gone up. That wasn't right. He recalled how in the penalty area, every enemy he defeated gave him experience. Even the warlord Igris had contributed to his progress. But here nothing. Then it hit him: the healing effect was likely suppressing his ability to gain experience. A critical limitation he hadn't accounted for. Jin-Woo began to realize something didn't add up. The mages standing at the rear of the battlefield weren't attacking him directly, and the knights, it seemed, were intentionally drawing all the damage, acting as a living barrier to distract him. That in itself was strange. He narrowed his eyes, wondering what kind of magic those mages were using. Was it a debuff, a curse? Yet despite the situation, he still didn't feel anything affecting him. Then in an instant his gaze sharpened. A new thought entered his mind. What if this wasn't about curses or debuffs at all? What if it was summoning magic? The realization struck him hard. He began to piece it all together. The gates weren't just spawning monsters randomly, they were generating knights at fixed intervals. That was why their numbers kept growing. No matter how many he defeated, they gave him no experience. They weren't real opponents, they were summoned artificial constructs. Jin-Woo clenched his fist, strength surging through his body as anger overtook him. It no longer mattered how many of these knights he cut down. The only way forward now was clear. The summoners, the mages at the back, were the last to leave the gate, and they would be the first to fall by his hand. Jin-Woo reached one of the mages, his body already pulsing with magical power and combat instincts. As he struck, he realized with clarity, these mages were the true commanders of the battlefield. The knights were nothing without them. Upon receiving the blow, the mage instantly dissipated into a cloud of dark mist, leaving behind no loot, no remains, nothing of use. And then it happened. The moment the mage died, every knight under their control began to collapse, falling one by one like puppets with cut strings. Jin-Woo didn't hesitate. He immediately used his blade throw skill, targeting the next group of enemies. It became clear to him now that these knights had all been summoned through magical gates by the mages. The knights weren't independent foes, they were tools bound to the will of their summoners. But this wasn't over. Jin-Woo knew more mages were still out there lurking in disguise. He activated his disguise skill to blend into the crowd, hoping to gain the upper hand. At the same time, many of the mages began casting detection spells, searching for their target. He thought to himself that perhaps they had already pinpointed his location. But as their detection magic pulsed through the field, it had a side effect. They revealed themselves as well. Their disguises failed, exposing their positions to him. Jin-Woo's eyes scanned the field, noting that there weren't many left. Quietly, he dropped down into the crowd, disappearing among the throng of knights, calm and composed, already planning his next strike. Jin-Woo turned his attention to the newly purchased weapon he had left embedded in the stone floor after massacring one of the mages. Without hesitation, he activated the first-level Ruler's Touch ability, an ability that required no mana but granted him the power to control objects. Without wasting precious time, he summoned the weapon to his hand and charged toward the remaining enemies in the dungeon. Reaching the next mage with deadly speed, Jin-Woo's blade tore through the target's body, disemboweling him with ease. A notification confirmed the kill as the mage dissolved into black smoke. Confidence radiated from Jin-Woo as he shouted with excitement that only 4 mages remained. However, he quickly realized that reaching them would not be simple. The mages were hiding behind knights who absorbed every strike meant for them. Nevertheless, Jin-Woo pressed forward with his new weapon, which made handling his attackers significantly easier. He noticed once again that his weapon had begun to dissolve into thin air, so he immediately used Ruler's Touch, stretching his hand out to stop it from vanishing completely. His hand, however, landed directly in front of a knight who failed to register Jin-Woo's rapid movement. In an instant, Jin-Woo clenched his hand into a fist and slammed it into the knight's head, shattering it with brutal force. Energized by the momentum, his eyes gleamed with deadly intent as he declared that he would slice every enemy in the room into pieces. Just as Jin-Woo had declared earlier that he could handle these talentless knights, he now towered over a heap of shattered monsters. Their broken bodies, twisted and crumpled, formed a grim mountain beneath his feet. He stood at the very top of the pile of fallen dungeon knights, his breath steady, his presence absolute. But the battle was far from over. The clang of steel still echoed in the distance. More of them were coming. The work was not yet done. There were still many left to be broken. Only one thing had slipped Jin-Woo's mind: his own safety. So focused was he on obliterating the enemies in front of him, he never noticed the danger closing in from behind. It struck fast and without warning, a blade plunging deep into his back. His body jerked violently, a growl tearing from his throat as the pain exploded through him. The blade shattered upon impact, fragments embedding themselves inside his flesh, but Jin-Woo didn't fall. His breathing grew ragged, blood seeping freely from the wound, but his legs refused to buckle. He endured as he always had, gritting his teeth through the agony. He wouldn't fall here, not now. How much longer? He roared, his voice echoing off the cold dungeon walls. Will you hide behind your puppets? No response came from the remaining mages, only their trembling fear. Irritated, Jin-Woo thrust his hand forward without hesitation, seizing one of the mages by the throat. The crushing grip mirrored his fury, and before the man could utter a spell or plea, Jin-Woo's dagger carved through flesh. Blood splattered his arm as the limp body sagged in his grip, lifeless. Tossing the corpse aside like garbage, Jin-Woo exhaled hard. 3 more, just 3 left, and he was done waiting. At one point, Jin-Woo noticed a faint purple glow emerging from beneath the immobilized corpses he had just slaughtered moments ago. Standing atop the mountain of monsters he had brought down with his own hands, he realized he was now on the back of something else, something that hadn't died. Beneath him, rising from the pile of dead bodies, stood a massive creature with a sword still lodged in its back. A golem of staggering size and power far superior to the combined might of the knights and mages he had just fought now loomed before him. Jin-Woo hadn't expected such a monster, not here, not now. Reacting instinctively, he leapt off its back and landed swiftly at a safe distance, dagger clutched tightly in his bandaged hand, unsure for a moment of how to deal with this hulking enemy. The golem was no ordinary stone creature. Its sheer strength and destructive capability tore through the stone floor, leaving behind a fractured terrain that was impossible to cross normally. Jin-Woo's eyes glowed with an ethereal blue light as he slipped into combat mode, his speed increasing enough to narrowly avoid the crushing blows. Then from the corner of his eye, he noticed a glow emanating from the mages nearby. It became clear to him they had sacrificed their entire battalion of knights and replaced them with this single devastating force. But Jin-Woo had no intention of dragging out a battle against a creature that would drain too much time, energy, and stamina. With a burst of supernatural speed and overwhelming strength, he decided to cut off the problem at its source. Launching himself toward the rear lines, he reached the mages in a flash, and obliterated every one of them in a single devastating strike, removing the summoners who maintained the golem's presence, leaving only one final adversary behind. Gathering all his remaining strength, Jin-Woo brought the battle to a close by finishing off the last mage, disposing of him with a precise and powerful strike that ended the brutal fight in a swift, almost graceful display of speed. At that very instant, the enormous stone golem began to collapse before his eyes, settling heavily onto the ground before crumbling into fragments. As the massive stones tumbled down, they shattered parts of the dungeon around them, and with them fell the knights who had long been a persistent nuisance to Jin-Woo throughout the battle. Jin-Woo looked over the aftermath with a calm expression, exhaling in quiet relief as he remarked that if the mages hadn't gathered together in one place, it would have been much more difficult to take down the golem. His gaze then shifted to a timer, tracking the amount of time he had spent inside this dungeon. Afterward, a notification appeared stating that all monsters had been eliminated. Jin-Woo thought there would be no more alerts, but soon noticed a new message. He could now choose a class based on the number of points he had earned. Clutching his weapon, he realized the quest had concluded and he was about to be assigned a profession. Confidently, he assumed it would be assassin. Another notice, however, clarified that the profession would be granted at the end of the player's analysis, and apparently Jin-Woo wouldn't get to choose for himself. He began analyzing his own stats. Having invested heavily in strength and agility, he speculated that he could be assigned warrior due to his strength or assassin due to his agility. He also considered the possibility of becoming a tank thanks to his high stamina. It seemed clear that the class would fall into one of those categories, and Jin-Woo told himself he'd be satisfied with any of them, knowing that whatever he received, he would emerge much stronger. Then a strange set of notifications began to appear. One declared that wherever the player went, the Reaper would follow, and that the path he walked would be littered with corpses and soaked in blood. Jin-Woo wasn't quite sure what the alerts meant. Another message followed stating that someone was leaving nothing for their allies to do, capable of managing everything with their own strength, perhaps a warrior. But then came the next message saying that Jin-Woo would have an army of the dead under his command, forcing the entire world to follow his laws. Jin-Woo was stunned by what he had just read. A chill crept down his spine as unease settled in. The ominous mystery sent a shiver through him. His eyes widened in horror as he saw something ahead, and in disbelief he asked himself, was this really his profession? Jin-Woo froze as the next notification appeared before him. His newly assigned profession was necromancer. He stared at the words in disbelief, his eyes wide and his mouth slightly open in horror. He didn't know how to react. This was nothing like what he had expected. Panic began to rise within him. His thoughts spiraled in every direction, unsure of what to make of this outcome. He had never invested in intelligence stats, not once. So why had he been assigned a magic-based class? Why this class? His mind raced. A necromancer, traditionally a dark mage, one who commanded the dead, wasn't a profession he had ever imagined for himself. According to the description, his subclass gave him control over an army of undead, each one loyal to his commands, following him without question, bound to his will. Jin-Woo couldn't recall hearing of any necromancers among the hunters in real life. But in games, they were always the ones who stood back, letting their minions fight in their place, rarely engaging in direct combat themselves. That wasn't his style. That wasn't who he thought he was, and yet, here he was. Jin-Woo recalled that ever since registering with the guild, he had been recognized as a combat-type hunter. He had always fought on the front lines, relying on weapons and physical strength. So why then had he been assigned this particular class? Trying to calm himself, he decided to search for the potential benefits of necromancy. Maybe there was an advantage to this path. After all, the idea of building an army that would follow him without question had its appeal. But almost immediately he considered the limitations. If his undead subordinates couldn't grow stronger, then over time his personal stats might become irrelevant. His power would stagnate. As he stood there torn between frustration and confusion, a new notification appeared before him. Will you accept this class? He stared at the message wondering if he even had a choice in the matter. Quietly he hoped, just maybe, that rejecting the offer might unlock other class options. With that thought in mind, he voiced his decision aloud. No, he said, refusing the class, hoping that a different path still remained. Jin-Woo recalled that hunters with unique abilities were highly sought after. They often worked for powerful guilds and held considerable influence. Their strength, prestige, and access to resources far exceeded that of ordinary hunters. As he stood there thinking, a new possibility stirred in his mind. Perhaps he thought, because of this hidden class I'll also gain a unique ability, something like the elite hunters from the major guilds. The idea sparked a glimmer of cautious hope within him. Jin-Woo raised his bandaged hand to his face, staring at it for a moment. He realized he didn't need to overthink it. Perhaps taking the necromancer class just to try it out wasn't such a bad idea after all. Still, he stood there quietly processing everything that had happened. As his eyes wandered across the battlefield littered with the corpses of knights and mages, something caught his attention. He leaned closer, focusing on one of the fallen mages. Something about them felt familiar, as if they had wielded an ability similar to necromancy. A strange thought crept into his mind. Was someone trying to show me how to use this class? He hesitated, caught between doubt and curiosity. Then the realization struck him. Unlike most mages, he had combat skills, raw physical strength, and weapon mastery that most spellcasters lacked. But what if he thought a mage could also fight in close combat? What would that make me? A hybrid unlike any other. It all began to make sense. With the abilities he now possessed, Jin-Woo could potentially clear a B-rank dungeon or even higher alone. He understood that in this strange game-like system, everything was tied to stats, levels, and skills, and even the summoned creatures could grow stronger. Finally, he saw the truth. This profession wasn't a limitation, it was a path forward, one where he didn't have to fight alone anymore. For the first time, Jin-Woo began to understand what it meant to command not just strength but a force. And with that, he made his decision, fully consciously and without regret. Finally, Jin-Woo made his decision. He would continue forward side by side with this class. He would embrace it. As soon as the choice was confirmed, a new alert appeared, followed by another. Due to the large number of accumulated points, Jin-Woo was now able to elevate the class to its highest level. The room around him slowly began to fill with thick black smoke curling up from the ground like mist from some ancient realm. Notifications appeared one after another stating that points had been allocated and the return stone remained unused. Then came another message, one that made him pause. Point total exceeded class limit. The black smoke, now swirling with greater intensity, began to approach him. Jin-Woo tensed, instinctively wary. There was something unnatural about it, and black smoke had never been a symbol of safety. He braced himself, expecting something dreadful, but to his surprise the smoke carried no ill intent. Instead, it gently enveloped his body, wrapping around him in a dense, pulsing cloud. A new alert appeared. His class had evolved. He had ascended to Shadow Lord. Nervous and still processing what was happening, Jin-Woo could hardly believe the surge of power coursing through him. He had not only accepted the necromancer path, he had taken it to its absolute peak. More alerts followed. An exclusive class ability has been acquired. All base characteristics have been enhanced. He was stronger now, much stronger. Jin-Woo was stunned by the sudden surge of power. The boost was immediate and overwhelming, clearly the result of the massive number of points he had accumulated throughout his journey. In an instant, he had become a formidable warrior. He could feel it, how far he had come. From starting as a common warrior, his progression had elevated him through the ranks, to berserker, then to a standard knight, and from there to something greater, the greatest sword master he had ever imagined. But it didn't stop there. He sensed another path awakening within him, the path of magic. From the class of ordinary mages, he rose to higher mage, and then beyond that to a powerful wizard capable of bending magic to his will. And then came the class that had once filled him with hesitation, necromancer. But now fully embraced it, transformed again into something transcendent. Jin-Woo had become the Lord of Shadows. Jin-Woo began to understand that if he hadn't accumulated such a large amount of points, he might have remained a typical necromancer, nothing more. But now something far greater had been unlocked within him. As he looked around the battlefield, he started to hear them, faint cries of pain and despair echoing from the fallen warriors and knights, voices of the dead who had once fought with pride and rage. Above several of the still bodies, glowing notifications slowly began to appear, signaling that shadow summoning was now possible. It all started to make sense. The key to this new power lay in the abilities of the necromancer class. Unlike what he once believed, this profession wasn't simple. It was layered, complex, and commanding. Jin-Woo realized that shadow extraction was the core of his new skill set, allowing him to transform corpses into loyal summoned creatures. And because the necromancer class was inherently one of leadership, it was designed to control an army. Soon a system prompt appeared before him, asking him to select a keyword, a command phrase to awaken the shadows. He paused, considering the weight of this moment. His gaze turned serious. He knew this wasn't just a phrase, it was something that would define him. After a brief silence, he chose it, rise. The word was short, powerful, and final. The moment his voice echoed, black smoke began to swirl around the broken armor and lifeless bodies of the knights. From one of them, a gauntlet twitched, then a hand reached out from within the ruined shell of armor, pulling itself free. At his command, a jet-black figure with a glowing blue gaze emerged and lowered itself into a bow before him. The sight took Jin-Woo by surprise. He wasn't used to this, not to teamwork, not to leading, but there was something compelling in it, something powerful. For the first time, he wasn't fighting alone, and it was only the beginning. He quickly realized that all of the fallen around him could now be turned into summoned beings. For the moment, they were of normal rank, but even that made them useful. Among them were not just ordinary knights, but elite units, shadow mages, rising beside him in silent obedience. After a quick count, Jin-Woo concluded he had summoned 27 knights and 3 mages, reaching his maximum of 30 subordinates. But then his gaze shifted, drawn to someone sitting against a distant wall apart from the rest. It was Igris. The presence of Igris made him pause. His squad now included 2 A-rank shadows, both radiating unique and powerful abilities. It was far beyond what he had imagined, but there was still more to consider. Jin-Woo wondered what would happen if I extracted the shadow of an A or S-rank hunter. The strength such a subordinate could offer would be immeasurable. Watching his shadows quietly form a line before him, Jin-Woo slowly raised his fist and tapped one of them gently. He spoke calmly, acknowledging that he had summoned some in a rush and now needed to make room for stronger allies. He apologized softly to the 11 weakest shadows and with a thought released them. In the next moment, the 11 vanished into black mist, gone forever, unable to return. Jin-Woo turned his head toward a specific direction, his eyes locking onto a figure that still held great significance to him, the blood-red warlord Igris. A powerful unit, perhaps the strongest he'd seen so far, and now he wanted him to serve. Without hesitation and unwilling to waste time lingering in doubt, Jin-Woo decided to try his luck. With a sharp breath and a steady voice, he gave the command, "Rise." The word echoed like a challenge. Seconds after the command left his lips, black smoke began to spill from Igris's crimson-drenched body. Slowly it twisted and coiled, trying to take shape, beginning to manifest as a shadow. Jin-Woo's heart skipped a beat. It's working, he thought, convinced he had succeeded in claiming this formidable being. But just as that confidence began to settle, a violent resistance erupted. A gust of wind burst from the crimson armor as the forming shadow fought back. Jin-Woo instinctively raised his arms to shield his face, bracing against the fierce torrent of pressure that came with the backlash. The black smoke swirled violently before him, impossible to stabilize. Then the system notification appeared: shadow extraction failed. Jin-Woo stood still for a moment, staring at the message, his breathing steady but inwardly disappointed. Why didn't it work? He asked himself, mind racing. The system reminded him he had 2 attempts left. It's not that easy, he muttered, eyes narrowing. He understood now that time played a role. It had already been nearly 4 hours since the boss's death. The longer he waited, the less likely the extraction would succeed. Still, he wasn't giving up, not yet. They said Jin-Woo had 2 more attempts at summoning the shadow of the boss in question. He would try to do what he wanted, voicing his command to rise. Jin-Woo's key expression, they observed, was followed by the same reaction from the warlord, not allowing him to take another shadow. Jin-Woo then shifted his gaze towards the throne, which was empty, no king or queen sitting on it, and there was no one in charge here in this place. They said he pointed his hand toward the empty throne, saying to stop defending this place whose owner had long since left this world. He was still gesturing with his bandaged hand, also vocalizing that the warlord had better follow whoever was now standing in front of him. Then the man thrust his bandaged hand toward the bloody warlord and tried one last time, ordering him to rise. They noted that the key expression was followed by some kind of reaction, already quite different, as a flash appeared and black smoke enveloped the space. Jin-Woo felt this was a different reaction and response to his order. He began to smile, realizing that the knight had decided to follow him. They said he watched as whoever was in front of him began to appear. He smiled, addressing the shadow quite formally. Then he looked down at his subordinate, changed his expression, and realized it was ridiculous and even kind of tedious wanting to change the nickname. They said he watched as the stranger's shadowy hand with sharp claws appeared before him in all its glory. He tried to think of a way to address him. Jin-Woo briefly pondered and decided to name this subordinate simply Igris, considering what he was like in his guise in front of him. He appeared to have quite a strong subordinate of high rank. Now he could be called Igris, and the most important thing was that this shadow was in his command. They said Jin-Woo looked at his subordinate with eyes glowing blue light and told him to let this shadow take care of him.